Movies will be popular forever. Look, the beginning of cinema had horror movies. Look at the fantastic horror movies made here in Berlin with Dr. Caligari and all that stuff. So it's part of the DNA of movies. And I know as a kid, I loved being scared because you know what? You know it's bullshit. You know it's not really happening. It's a movie and it sucks you in and it just gives you a great thrill as a kid. Well, adults get the same thrill, but with more sophisticated horror. Then you get to Polanski and Rosemary's Baby and stuff like that, Repulsion. So you have Hitchcock too, psychological horror. It's a staple of drama itself. The Beast Within was my first intentional horror movie. Some people say that some of my other movies are horror movies, but The Beast Within was my first Hollywood movie. For me at the time it was a big budget, $5 million, I couldn't believe it. Well, the producer Gabriel Katzka and his partner Harvey Bernhard, they were distinguished producers and they had a deal with United Artists and they liked my film Mad Dog Morgan starring Dennis Hopper. And so they asked me whether I'd like to do a Hollywood horror movie. Well, it didn't take long for me to say yes. Well, they gave me 3 composers to choose from, and I loved some of the scores Les Baxter had done for Roger Corman. And so I leapt at the opportunity to work with him. He was fantastic. Not much of the novel is in the movie. What happened was Harvey and Gabe Katzka got a writer, Tom Holland, a good friend of mine now, to write a script. For some reason, to control the writer and the director, they never introduced us. So I never met Tom Holland until after the film. Now we're best of mates, but I never met him during the shooting of the film. So it was really its own creation. I'm a big Sam Peckinpah fan, and when I realized I could use a lot of actors who were in Sam Peckinpah movies, I started casting every Peckinpah character actor I could find in the movie, which is why you'll recognize all the faces. Well, that for me was the reason to make the film. That scene, I really wanted it to be incredible. And when we first edited the scene, they had a test screening at 20th Century Fox, even though it was a UA picture, for some reason it was tested at Fox. And they had an audience of about 1,000 people. And when the beast started turning, when the face bubbles and all that, people started screaming and some people started running out of the theatre. And that had happened also with The Exorcist, by the way, when the head spun around, had a similar reaction. But the studio executives got worried. They thought, you know, they said to me, can you tone it down, Philippe? Because we can't have people vomiting and running out of the cinema. And I said, well, you know, I'll think about how I can tone it down. They left the room, and Harvey Bernhard, who had produced The Omen, he said, don't listen to a thing. Just keep it, say you're going to do it, and just keep it exactly like that. I love it. And so the executives never looked at the film again, and we never touched it. So that's the original transformation. That's why it's so over the top. As a general comment with my films, the very things that get attention that some people don't like, and I've got a theory about this, some people don't like things because they notice them. They think if they notice something, oh, it must be bad. And in The Beast Within, it was the transformation scene was over the top. So some people who didn't get it, that was, you know, over the top, they go, oh, that transformation, no, that's because they notice it. It's kind of dumb. But with The Beast Within, it was controversial. Fortunately, the producer backed me all the way on it. Harvey Bernhard backed me all the way on the crazy tongue, all this stuff coming out. The special effects guy, Tom Berman, and this is documented in the Japanese featurette thing. Apparently, I didn't know that he was that upset. Apparently, he was really upset because when you blow hot air into these bubbles, the bladders, and I thought it was hilarious when they went crazy, But he got upset because he said the bubbles weren't supposed to be that big. I mean, I saw the film as a kind of encyclopedia of horror movies. I had a lot of, the word now is memes or tropes or cliches really from other horror movies in it. So I was having a lot of fun doing that. I've always liked outre or strange things in movies because I think it's because when I was a kid seeing every movie that came out, I got intrigued by the mistakes in films. That got me interested in the process of how you make a film. For example, in The Greatest Story Ever Told, when Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount in 70mm, I noticed, and there's a lot of extras, I noticed an extra looking at his watch on the big screen. I thought, that's really fantastic. I just started realizing how it's all created and how it's all false. So then I started looking for mistakes in continuity in other movies. And that led me to the cinema of surrealism, Blood of a Poet, Cocteau, kind of a horror movie, really. And L'Âge d'Or, Buñuel and Dali made the film together. That's horror, the ants coming out of so there's a horror element to surrealism, and in art itself, of course. So you have great artists like Francis Bacon who paint horror, and I don't need to go into the history of art to describe all the horror paintings, but so it attracted me as unusual and as original. I mean, I was more interested in a horror, I was more interested in Vertigo, for example, than The Sound of Music as a kid. So my tastes are eclectic, I have to say. Well, my father, who went to Berlin University in 1933, originally wanted to make films himself. Interesting footnote to history is his landladies in Berlin, he lived in Rankenstrasse, his landladies were Erich von Stroheim's sisters. And they would show him letters from Hollywood. They would say, "We have this famous plaza in Hollywood, look." And my dad would read these letters from Stroheim. So it's always been, so he encouraged me, and he bought me an 8mm camera very early. I actually had a privileged cultural childhood. I didn't know, to me it was just my life. Marcel Marceau, for example, who had been my father's partner in the resistance, would visit us often in Australia. And my God, as I got older, I realized what a legend he was. So I was very lucky. And then there were artists around. My mother was a painter, and my father had in those years, they had the gymnasium in Leipzig, gymnasiums in Leipzig. So his education was incredible culturally, my father. So he spoke 7 languages, and he was always involved in and talking about art, culture. My connection to Germany is very deep, and it's through my father's side. My grandfather, Max Morawski, was born in Breslau, and then my great uncle, Fritz Morawski, was born in Breslau. I had an aunt, Charlotte Morawski, one of the first women to get a thesis published in Breslau in 1911 on Nietzsche. We go deep, the Morawskis. And when Hitler started kicking Jews out of university, my father was kicked out along with his professor of physics, Albert Einstein. And my father went to Paris, and because he spoke German, of course, he was very valuable in the French resistance when the Nazis invaded. So he went quite high up in the French resistance. So I grew up with all kinds of stories about this, and I became fascinated with why that disaster had happened. And when Swastika, my documentary, which became quite famous because we exposed Eva Braun's home movies to the world in a film for the first time, when that happened, the German distributors got very nervous, and the film was banned here for 34 years. But in 2009 we showed it in Germany for the first time at the Biberach Film Festival, and the premiere, which I think is an interesting footnote to film history, we showed the premiere in Berlin in the Ufer screening room where Goebbels checked all the films for propaganda. So I'm proud to say I think I broke the curse. I see painting and film and writing and acting, I see it all as the same thing. Art, creativity, ideas. And when we're young men and women, people always try and pigeonhole you to have a career. You just be a film director, just be a painter. But I don't think it works that way, really. I mean, can you imagine Van Gogh going for advice, for career advice? You know, what does he do for his career? He never sold he sold one painting in his whole life. Anyway, I think painting and film are very similar, and no one would think anything of a painter doing a series of paintings about the same subject. Painters take one subject and they study it. I'm doing that with film, with my interest in German history and my background. So I've got various things to say about this, past and present. Dennis Hopper and I had a great collaboration on Mad Dog Morgan, and it was my first movie with a Hollywood movie star. You know, I didn't know what to expect, and I certainly didn't expect to see the consumption of alcohol and strange substances and everything else that Dennis was doing at the time. I thought, well, I guess Hollywood, all Hollywood actors, I guess that's what they do. I didn't know any better. Which, because I was naive, I could handle it. If it didn't upset me because I didn't know what was going on with what, you know. Except about 2 weeks in, I thought, this bastard is going to die. No one can drink that much and do all that. He was taking LSD as well, and I thought, this bastard is going to die, and my career's going to be over. And so I went to Jeremy Thomas, the producer, with me, who was my good friend. Jeremy became a very distinguished producer later on. They did The Last Emperor and many other films. And anyway, I said, Jeremy, this guy's going to die. Our career's going to be over. But I said, I know what we'll do. I'm going to cast his face in plastic. And so when he dies tomorrow, we've put the mask on for the long shots, all the riders. We can have him when he's dead at the end, we'll put the mask on. And Jeremy says, yeah, right, he's going to die. Yeah, do it. So we cast his face in plastic. And Dennis comes to me and he says, hey man, what's this about my face you want? What's that with the face? And I said, Dennis, I had this idea. You're on your horse, you're riding along, you look up in the sky and you see your own face and it blows up. Dennis goes, far out, man. It's fantastic. It's really cool. So anyway, 5 weeks later, he's healthier. I'm directing it. I'm exhausted. He's fine. He's healthy. And I said, Dennis, you know, you were fantastic, which he was. And I said, thank you. He said, wait a minute, we haven't done the scene when I'm on, I see my face and it blows up. So I had to film that. And then I said, thank you. We want to get him out of the country. He was getting too much attention and it was difficult. And he said, wait a minute, you haven't done the shot of me dead. And this is why I think Dennis is a great actor. Because I said, well, don't worry about that. We've got the mask. It's a long shot. And he said, no one plays me dead. I play me dead. Okay, so we shot that, got him off. I remember him now with great affection. I mean, he was brilliant. I think his performance is amazing, actually. But there was one interesting thing where I had cast a almost blind and almost deaf man to be a doctor who he has to put his head on dying Mad Dog Morgan and go, he's dead. So I thought, he looks fantastic, how bad can that be in acting? It's got to be fine, right? So Dennis is dying, and he's going, dying, and while he's going, the guy puts his head on him and says, he's dead. So I cut. I said to the actor, look, he's making noises, how can he be dead? Wait till he stops making noises. And then the guy says to me, I can't hear him and I can't see him. And I didn't want to fire him, take too long. So I said, what shall we do? He said, get a really long stick, get like a long stick, and then when you want me to say he's dead, poke me. Okay, so we shoot the scene. Dennis finally stops gurgling. He goes, he's dead. I cut, I poke him, he's dead, perfect, cut. Well, Dennis jumps up, enraged, just enraged. He says, listen, I've worked with some motherfucking directors in my time. Henry Hathaway, I've worked with some real bastards, but I've never seen a director poke an actor with a stick. What is that? So I had to explain it to him. He calmed down, that was fine. The story of Howling 2, which I wanted to tell, was really how interesting the making of Howling 2 was. It was one of the first films made behind the Iron Curtain after Yentl and Amadeus. So we were a Hollywood crew behind the Iron Curtain. And I went there with Christopher Lee, who I didn't know had been a war hero for the Czechs. He had been involved in the assassination of SS boss Reinhard Heydrich, which was incredible. So when we got to the airport in Prague in 1984, there was a military reception for him. And I said to Christopher, I wonder who that's for? And he said, no, that's for me. I said, really? And then he explained the whole thing to me. So that is just a fascinating part. It's why the film has a weird atmosphere, because we are shooting it in a Soviet-occupied country. So everything's a bit strange. You can't put your finger on it. And it was very difficult to make because I had 140 Czechs. I don't speak one word of Czech, except maybe vodka. I don't even think vodka's in Czech. But anyway, so I had 4 interpreters. It was cold, it was difficult, but Christopher made it great for me because he told me all this. There was this other dimension to being there because of the history. We went to the church in the center of Prague where the SS drowned the Czech partisans, and Christopher paid his respects. There's another aspect to this. When I made that film, it was a job. My wife needed a car, and it's a job. And I had always loved horror movies, so I had no problem with werewolves, and it was fun for me. Plus the adventure of making a film behind the Iron Curtain. But subsequently, very recently, I read an amazing, almost deathbed interview with Kurt Schordermack, who was the writer of that film, The Wolfman, the original Wolfman for Universal. And he said something which kind of blew my mind. He said that what The Wolfman is about is the persecution of the Jews in Nazi Germany. He said he was on the run from Nazis himself. He ended up in Hollywood, ran all the way to Hollywood, and that the Wolfman is Jewish, and he doesn't know why he's being turned into a monster, and that's why he's had this angst. And he says the full moon was the swastika. When he sees the swastika, he changes into a werewolf, and it's irrational hatred of him, and that's why the film's so powerful, because you like the guy. You see he's suffering. He doesn't want to be a monster. So I read this interview, I thought, oh my God, that's just absolutely amazing, the undercurrent. And I think that's deep. And then I started thinking, maybe horror is a sort of therapy, mass therapy for terrible things. If you start worrying about how your films are going to turn out, you'll never make a film. I've now made 40 films. And when I make a comedy, it turns out to be a drama. When I make a drama, it turns out to be a comedy. I don't know. But I'm just glad that there's a new generation who see the funny part of it. I have a sense of humor, which sometimes gets the better of me. Sometimes I got to keep it under. But I do like satire very much. But the audience, the younger audience now, they see all the jokes in the whole thing. I mean, Christopher Lee is like poker-faced throughout this incredible insanity. Now, kids seeing that movie, they pick up on the weirdness of it. It's like me as a little kid seeing weird things in movies. I've ended up making the weird things. Look, I didn't know much about Sybil, but John Daly, the producer, introduced me to her, and I thought she'd be a great, albeit unusual queen of the werewolves. And let me tell you something interesting about when we're making the film, she came to me. We had a big scene when she's with all the werewolves and everything, before an orgy scene, werewolf orgy, that's funny. And I thought it was anyway. Anyway, she came to me, she said, I've got conjunctivitis, I can't see, I looked in her eyes and it was terrible. She said, I can't shoot the scene. I said, Sybil, we have to shoot. Wear sunglasses. And she said, well, why would I wear sunglasses inside? I said, Sybil, you're the queen of the werewolves. You can do whatever you want. We've got to shoot. So she wore sunglasses and in the scene inside. And that was such an interesting look that became the poster. And from that moment on, in Hollywood, every horror movie had vampires and werewolves wearing sunglasses inside. So by complete accident, we created a iconic look. You know, Christopher Lee had a wonderful sense of humor. It's very dry sense of humor. And he was, the English expression is, he was game for anything. He would do anything for a movie. And he just thought it was funny himself. He put the sunglasses on, the punk, because he's supposed to be disguised as a punk in this punk club. So his disguise is the sunglasses, which is hilarious in itself. That was, they were real punks. And if I can just quickly tell that story, I asked the Czech studio, we were working out of Prague, I asked them, do you have punks? We need punks for this. This is 1984. And the studio guy said, well, what's a punk? I said, well, it's they have funny hair, they have tattoos, they have nose rings, and he said, I don't know. We'll ask. We'll put the word out in the city that punks should come to the studio for this movie, Hollywood movie. Well, 1,000 punks showed up, but they didn't even know they had them. And this is what I mean about how the making of this film is I want to make a film about it. So these punks show up and the authorities get alarmed. The Soviets and the local police get alarmed. And while we're shooting, the assistant director comes up to me and says, there's a problem. The whole studio's been surrounded by armed soldiers and police and a general wants to talk to you now. So I go out and there's a general there, looks like he just was killing people in Afghanistan or something. And he says, and there's a translator, and the translator says, the general wants to know, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm making a film about werewolves, and these punks turn into werewolves in a nightclub, and it's not even Prague, it's supposed to be in Los Angeles. And the general, it translates back, the general's next question is, what is a werewolf? And so I say, well, werewolves, translated back, a werewolf is a man who turns into a wolf when there's a full moon. Well, the general is, he can't stop him laughing. Funniest thing he's ever heard. He says, you have 30 minutes to finish whatever you're doing, and then everyone must leave 3 at a time every 10 minutes. This is illegal. We can't have young people in a crowd. And so that's what happened. And when I got back to my hotel, All the punks were outside my hotel screaming, "Freedom, freedom, yay," cheering as I went, So we struck a blow against the communists. The film was made under a great deal of financial pressure and the whole atmosphere and everything, and we were getting material sent from Hollywood into Prague, including rubbish, and by the way, because I needed rubbish from LA and we couldn't find anything that looked like capitalist trash in Prague. And so we shipped giant boxes of garbage. My wife collected garbage in LA and shipped it to me. The werewolf suits had not arrived 2 weeks into the shoot. So I called the producer and I said, "Where are the werewolf suits? We're 2 weeks in. What's that?" He said, "Don't worry, they're on the way." But boxes arrived like a few days later, big boxes, stenciled 20th Century Fox, Planet of the Apes. So I open these boxes and it's the monkey suits from Planet of the Apes. So I call the producer, I say, "Listen, John, everyone knows howling is werewolves and you've sent me bloody monkey suits. What's going on?" He says, "You're talented, Philippe. You're very talented. You can figure that out." I said, "Wait a minute. This has got nothing to do with talent. There's monkeys and there's wolves." And he hangs up. Christopher Lee heard this conversation and he says to me, "Philippe, dear boy, I have an idea for you. Tomorrow, do a close-up of me." He loved close-ups. "Do a close-up of me and I will explain that before man turns into wolf, he goes through a monkey phase. Man, monkey, wolf. Get it?" I said, "Christopher, that's brilliant. You've saved my... I wish you were going to do exactly that." So we did that. The film comes out and some critics say Philippe Mora has lost his mind with this, completely lost his mind, it's nonsense, this film. But there's one very interesting thing in the film. It shows for the first time that before man turns into wolf, he turns into monkey. Christopher Lee had a very interesting war record in intelligence. And after he passed away, sadly, fairly recently, it became a little bit controversial with some newspaper trying to sell newspapers said that it wasn't true. I know for a fact that it's true because I was with him in Prague when he's greeted by military honors from the Czechs, and there's no question that he was involved in a lot of intelligence operations. Further, intelligence operations by their nature have to be confidential, and the British are extremely tough on this issue with their thing there called the Official Secrets Act, where they're never allowed to tell anything about anything if they've been a secret agent in the war, going back to the World War II. I visited Christopher in the 90s in his apartment in London, and he had a room this big full of memorabilia, Nazi stuff, he'd ripped off the epaulets of Nazis, like 1,000 things, an incredible collection. That's not the point. He told me at that meeting, he said that the intelligence officials had just visited him in his apartment, basically telling him to shut up. This is in the 90s, basically reminding him that he could go to prison if he talks about what he did in World War II. So it's a very serious matter, and why anyone would doubt his bravery or heroism, it's just bullshit. The scene, there's a notorious scene, well actually there's a few notorious scenes in Howling 2, but one is the threesome of Sybil with Marsha Hunt and Judd Omen, I think his name was Judd Omen, and it's werewolf sex. But one critic said this is the only scene in cinema history which has lesbianism, bestiality, werewolf transformation, homosexuality, heterosexuality, and lesbianism again, and than something else. They said it's the only scene in film history. Well, it was very difficult to film because it was scripted as they turn into werewolves as they're having a threesome, a menage a trois. It was a menage a trois with werewolves. The problem was, Sybil, we had put hair on her, but you know, when you do a transformation, you have to stop shooting and then put more hair on, and then stop shooting, more hair on. Well, the hair kept coming off, so if you know, I've never had sex with a werewolf myself, but you usually touch someone when you're having sex with them. So we started off, they're touching. Well, every time they touched, the hair would come off in the hands. So I had to say, cut, look, when you have to do something, you're going to have sex without touching. And so the cast went, what do you mean? I said, look, you have to stylize it, make it like a ballet. Just go like, make it like a ballet. But you can't touch because otherwise we can't shoot because the hair comes off. So they did that. So what you see in the film is this very strange, surrealistic scene where they're moving very strangely so that they don't get the hair off each other. I think it added a lot to the scene, actually, the strangeness of it. America is strange in many respects, and one of the strangest things is it's okay in movies to torture people, cut their heads off, decapitate them, cut their guts out, show the intestines, cut them up, but God forbid you show a woman's breasts. And that's one of the things that hit Howling 2, by the way, because that was quite sexual, which had not been done in a wide release like that. Obviously there's sex in movies forever, but no one had sexualized werewolves, for example, to that extent. And it's only in retrospect I realised that's what got up the nose of some people, especially when we showed Sybil showing her breast 17 times in the end credits.
But that wasn't you. That was not you editing. That did somebody did that, huh? And you didn't. At least Sybil didn't know about that.
What happened was, since it's so famous, let me tell you what happened. So, it's famous because 15-year-old American kids, grew up on Sybil's breasts. What happened was, I had to start Death of a Soldier, so I went to Australia to start shooting. I delivered my cut to John Daly, and I had her showing her. I thought it was funny. She shows her breasts, and the werewolves go, and I did that like 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 times. I thought it was funny. Like you have bloopers at the end of the movie. It was like that. And then John Daly called me in Australia, and he said, "Oh, that shot of Sybil, the breath, that's just one of the most incredible things. Can we put more? Is it okay with you if we put more shots of it in the end, under the end credits?" And I thought, this guy's crazy, but I thought, that's funny. Okay, yeah, I said, go for it, John. It's sure. But I thought he meant like 2 more shots, maybe. I didn't know he meant 10 more shots. So then someone called me who saw it, and I'm in Australia, and said, "Hey, listen, why have you put 17 shots of Sybil showing her tits?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, there's 17 shots of it, I counted." And again, I thought it was so outrageous. I thought it was just, I said, if they're crazy enough to release this movie with that in it, go for it. What do I care? It's funny anyway, the movie. And so that's how it came about. Look, it has women with pouches. It has marsupial women. If that isn't funny, I don't know what is. But you brought up an interesting question, because satire is very difficult, because some people just don't get it. They don't know, they don't understand that it's supposed to be funny. And the problem with that is, if it's not supposed to be funny, it's the most weirdest film they've ever seen, and they get aggressive about, it's just rubbish. People don't like to feel dumb. And sometimes satire makes people unconsciously feel stupid if they don't get the joke. I don't care anymore. I think they just, I can't, I've just got to make the film, and if there are people with my sense of humour, who have my same sensibility, who like it, that's good enough for me. Look, the premise was funny. It's funny having a superhero with a tummy, a little bit, a little bit fat. It's funny that they have to sober him up. My original choice for the role was James Coburn, and he was a friend of mine, and in like Flint and so many movies, he's a great actor. Magnificent Seven, Great Escape. Anyway, he read the script and he said, Philippe, I want to work with you, but I don't get this. Like, why am I attacked by vacuum cleaners? And I said, well, it's surreal. It's surrealism. And James said, well, yeah, it's surrealism, but I don't get it. Look, let's do something else together, which we did, by the way. I made a film with him later on, Death of a Soldier. So anyway, then we offered it to Alan Arkin, and he really liked it for a couple of reasons. One of them being that his father had been blacklisted. His father was a school teacher, as I recall, and that was a terrible thing in America at the time, McCarthyism. So Alan wanted to do it because he knew what the blacklist was. He thought it was funny that McCarthy, I told him I'm going to get newsreel footage of real McCarthy, Senator McCarthy, and cut it in with him. Anyway, cut to, I'm filming the vacuum cleaner scene. It's the morning, and I have like 20 puppeteers with strings on the vacuum cleaners, and everything's ready. And Alan Arkin says, hey, listen, I don't get this. Why am I being attacked by vacuum cleaners? Alan, it's too late, Alan. It's too late. We're shooting. Everything worked for that scene. And my cameraman was very good too, Mike Malloy. I should mention him because he had just finished Barry Lyndon. He worked with Kubrick on Clockwork Orange. And he shot Mad Dog Morgan and The Return of Captain Invincible. So he is a great classic style cinematographer. So when everything works, it's fantastic, and it's hard to get to that. It's kind of a Zen thing, really. You can't keep it all in your head when you're directing. You have to just go with it in a kind of a Zen space. I know that sounds a bit voodoo, but that really worked. And I think humor is very important. If you can make the audience smile, you're there, and if you can make them laugh, even better. But if the audience is looking at a scene and they're smiling, they're feeling good, and that scene makes you feel good as soon as he starts singing, because you go, Christopher Lee singing and dancing, it's funny. I remember Christopher Lee also, with great affection, working with him on The Return of Captain Invincible. And that's when I learned how, he was kind of I'd say, exaggerated perfectionist. For example, this is amusing, I think. I noticed when the camera was tracking past him in a shot, a complicated shot, he did this. Take two, camera comes past him, he goes. I said, Christopher, I can't help wondering, why are you doing this when the camera passes you? He said, my dear boy, I've been watching the focus pull up, and he doesn't know what the bloody hell he's doing, so I'm focusing myself. I was like, Christopher, congratulations, you're the first self-focusing actor I've ever met. You're going to save us a lot of money. And that was just so crazy, focusing himself. But he loved singing in that film, and there's a particular number which was released as a single in Germany, Name Your Poison, written by Richard O'Brien and Richard Hartley of Rocky Horror Picture Show fame. And the lyric of the song is all drinks, all cocktails, Bloody Mary, Chablis, and not just anything to do with liquor, but it's very cleverly written. And he loved, again, his sense of humour came to the fore. He just loved singing, and he loved that number. And he says in quite a few places that's one of the favourite things he'd ever done. The Return of Captain Invincible, the script, was given to me by my agent then, Robert Littman, and it was intriguing to me because of the newsreel at the beginning that was scripted I like the idea of a superhero being blacklisted and alcoholic. Prior to when we made Captain Invincible, no superhero had a problem. But since we made Captain Invincible, they all had problems, personal problems. But we were the first, he was an alcoholic. I wanted to make a musical. The script was not a musical. I just wanted to make a musical. And I said to the producers, I'll make this if I can make it a musical. And that was my condition. And I had enough clout at that point that they said yes. And my idea was to have every style of popular music in the film. In other words, each number would be a different style of popular music. Country and western, rock and roll, ballad, Broadway. So I still find that really interesting about the film. And Richard O'Brien loved the idea. He wrote three songs. And that's really how it came about, because I wanted to make a musical. And funnily enough, and Alan Arkin and Christopher Lee both agreed to do it because they love musicals. And Alan Arkin sings very well too. The movie was based on a bestseller, but the interesting thing about it was that the author said it really happened to him. The author said he had been abducted by aliens. And I knew the author before he wrote the book. I met him in London in, I guess, 1968. I met him in London. And so I knew him since then. Then he wrote a whole lot of, he wrote The Wolfen, he wrote a vampire thing, and he was a very successful horror writer. And in 1984, I think it was, in New York, or maybe 85, I ran into him. Well, first of all, I saw his name on a book, Wolfen. I said, I wonder if that's the same guy I know. So I contacted the publisher to contact him, and he called me. How are you? What's been happening? Everything. And I had lunch with him, and he seemed strange to me. And I said, I hope you don't mind, but you seem a bit. Are you okay? And he said, well, you'll laugh at me if I tell you what's happening. I said, I won't laugh at you. He said, well, I think I've been abducted by little blue aliens about this big. And I didn't laugh. It was very difficult not to laugh, but I didn't laugh. And he said, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, I think you need a psychiatrist. I said, we are friends. I thought you need a psychiatrist and write a book about it. So because of that, he sent me the book when it was unpublished. And this would make a great movie. Let's make the movie of this. So we got it together. This is a short version. It's a long story. But the funny thing is, when I first tried to raise the money, I had the incredible response from a couple of studio executives. We don't want to make this because we don't believe it's true. And I said, well, is Raiders of the Lost Ark true? I mean, since when is true supposed to be why you make a movie in Hollywood? It was ridiculous. Well, we think he's lying. Anyway, so the book went through the roof. #1 non-fiction bestseller on the New York Times. So I was able to raise the money independently because it was such a big book. And then it was very newsworthy at the time. We had, our phones were bugged. His phone was bugged by Navy. They wanted to know. I was asked by a U.S. government official whether I believed it was true. They thought they seriously asking had he met aliens. So it was an interesting experience making the film. All my films, I've made a lot of films now, I made 40 movies, but all my films seem to polarize people when they come out, and then, 20 years later they say it's a classic. I don't want to be 20 years ahead anymore. I just want to be 1 week ahead would be good. Just 1 week ahead. But look, I don't know. It's fashionable. Some films, it's generational. The younger people the younger people now seem to like my films more than ever, and they keep, because I've made so many films, they discover films. They discover that I've done. They go, and there's the whole documentary thing. Done some documentaries. I've given up trying to analyze it, really, what the reaction is to various films. When there's a release, a new release, like a Blu-ray, which I think the Blu-ray thing is great, that just naturally generates more attention. So if they do a Blu-ray of A Breed Apart, that'll get more attention. If they do a Blu-ray of Death of a Soldier, if you see what I mean. Well, I've discovered that you really only need to know about 5 words in German. Scheiße, Danke, Bitte, Genau, and Wunderberg. Now, if you get those right, basically you can deal with any situation.